Welcome to Eccleston Piano Teacher. In this short video I'm exploring the possibility of adults starting piano or keyboard from the beginning, and also I'll be giving a few thoughts on restarting after some years of inactivity, the rusty pupil. There are factors on your side and there's factors not on your side, so let's get going. I really enjoy working with adults and I give them lots of encouragement to take up the piano or the keyboard regardless of their age. Currently, June 2022, around 60% of my pupils are adults, and just to have some sort of cut-off point, I consider an adult to be above 20 years of age, and I'm aware that people that are younger than that, they're often very mature in their thoughts, but just for sake of argument, 19 or 20 age or over. Adults approach learning the piano with a tremendous appreciation of music and an acceptance that practice is essential to progress. However, although the average adult has much appreciation of music, much more often than children, the older an adult is, the muscles and their brains do not acquire new concepts and skills as quickly as in their younger years. Despite this, in the first 6 months of lessons, it's often common for adults to progress much quicker than children. Unfortunately, this pace in the early stages is rarely maintained, and adults frequently plateau around grade 2, and sometimes, I'm afraid, at a stage before that, round about grade 1. Children are able to progress further than this with relative ease if, and that is a big if they put in the work, in other words, the practice. As long as adults accept and understand this, then we usually have great fun. In other words, they have to apply themselves in a way that it may be 10 steps forward and 6 back between lessons. Whereas for a child, it may be, say, 10 steps forward and 3 back. A few years ago, I had someone who was over 80, just over 80, and to this person's credit, they really applied themselves well. Unfortunately, the arthritis in the fingers was really quite bad, but they told me that the bigger problem was to do with understanding concepts, such as what do we mean by the second beat of the bar, or the difference between beat and rhythm. And he told me that after a week, he'd largely forgotten what I'd managed to explain to him the week before. So my word of caution, not every adult realises just how patient they have to be before they tackle their favourite pieces. It takes gallons of practice, if you're starting from complete beginner, to get up to something like the Moonlight Sonata, first movement, or Fur-Elise. These, in their original forms, many people don't get to a stage where they can play them, ever. As a complete beginner, I'm afraid, say from the age of 60 and above. Playing piano is a very technical activity. However, if expectations are fairly low key, then we usually have great fun, and there is some feeling of satisfaction and progress in managing the simplest of pieces, say about grade 0.5, grade 0.7, or up to grade 1. So to think primarily now about those who are, say, over the age of 50 and they're coming to piano or keyboard as a complete beginner. So I've not been selling this to you, and I'm just being honest. It's going to be quite hard going. You will have to moderate your expectations. If you're realistic in your expectations, then it's not going to be a problem. Apparently, some people who have been extremely successful in their career, either medical or law or something like that, and they start piano at the age of 60, completely from scratch, it can be a bit of a shock to them in that they don't find it as easy as they thought they would, because everything they've turned their hand to in life has come to them fairly easily, if not very easily. And with piano, it's such a technical activity, it's not necessarily going to work like that. So you have to moderate your expectations, and actually you have to approach it with a massive dose of humility. You may find that your grandchildren have started after you, and yet they're outpacing you. Well, that's just the way it is. I hope that doesn't put you off, but what you do have in your favour is that you have a massive appreciation of music, and you can often interact with the teacher asking questions in a way that children can't or won't or simply don't. Adults often chat to me about all sorts of issues, but it's very stimulating for me as a teacher, and it will help yourselves as well if you find a teacher who is very sympathetic towards you, just wanting to talk about certain issues. Why did this passage go wrong? What's the best way to practice? And so on. So the sooner you get going, the better. And I do advise you as well to get a teacher. Those who don't get a teacher do tend to struggle. They try this YouTube video, they try that YouTube video, or just reading a book. I once came across a pupil, he just read a book, and in 5 or 6 years, there wasn't hardly any progress at all, really. Now, you may save yourself a lot of money that way, but you're not going to make much progress. Something I've noticed about piano pupils is that if they had a foundation as a child, they had even just 1 year of lessons, and sometimes not necessarily on piano or keyboard, this establishes something which is like a launch pad for coming back to it, even if it's 20, 25, 30 years of a break since they last had lessons. And if I contrast that with an adult who is about 50, who's never had any music lessons at all, there seems to be greater ease in coming through the early stages if you had these lessons all these years before. So if you haven't had lessons as a child, I'm afraid it's definitely harder normally. It's not impossible to start from scratch, say if you're at 50 or 60, but you have to appreciate that you will have to work harder under these circumstances than if you'd had a few lessons as a child. There just seems to be something psychological or to do with confidence, which establishes something which is never forgotten entirely. You may feel very rusty, can perhaps hardly remember what a treble clef was if you had lessons all these years ago, but there seems to be a residue of these early lessons which stand you in good stead. Sisi started piano from scratch with me in autumn 2021, so that's about 8 months ago, and this piece she's playing is a grade 1 exam piece, the swing. She's made good progress. She's not a complete beginner in the sense that she had music lessons on an instrument as a child in China, not a European instrument, a traditional Chinese instrument which I cannot pronounce. Tom started piano 3 years ago, June 2021. His primary interests are not really classical music, although he has come to appreciate that because they were written originally for piano, often they are more satisfying than arrangements of, say, pop music, which are simplified down to grade 1 or below. And this piece is one of the, possibly I think, the hardest current piece for Associated Board Grade 1. It's Melodie by Schumann. Playing piano is a wonderful activity which gives your brain a real workout. It really makes you think, it makes you concentrate, which is of course very healthy for us all. It helps to keep us young in our minds and can become a social activity, as you may eventually use your skills in groups such as joining a band, accompanying a choir, or playing piano in a church Sunday school, or simply with your grandchildren. So I encourage you to give piano a shot, or keyboard, to hang in there, and above all, to enjoy it.